Jerusalem, the eternal capital, and he was asked, or rather he asked some security forces to go outside. Francis Macron berates Israeli police at Jerusalem church. This is because there is a church in Jerusalem that still belongs to France. You get these corners of the world, far-flung corners of the world that might be thousands of miles away from the state that they claim to be part of, and people will tell you, Monsieur, you are standing on French soil, or this is American soil, or somehow the Falklands all the way down in the southern hemisphere are British soil. And it's a strange loophole. I remember visiting the Iranian embassy a few years back when I was planning a trip there and trying to help a friend apply for a visa that he never got in the end. And because we were technically on Iranian soil, women were having to cover their hair with the headscarf, as is the law in Iran, even though we were standing in central London. So there is a corner of Jerusalem that is technically France, and Macron told the Israeli police where to go. And some people have been saying they're not used to hearing that. They're not used to being told what to do. They're usually dishing out the orders. But is this part of a hierarchy? Even in the Middle East, long after Sykes-Picot carved up the Middle East, and although Palestine became part of the British mandate and the French took control of Lebanon and Syria, do the French still have some clout in the region? DJ Rustler is saying, hey DJ Rustler, welcome along. Give me a call if you fancy it, if you've got the time. It's the number on the screen, 07880 526 445 +44 if you're outside the UK. Maybe you're in France. Maybe you're in the church in Jerusalem that's technically a part of France. But maybe, just maybe, the Crusaders never went away, and they've always had their eye on this part of the world. Recently, when I was in Crac du Chevalier in Syria, some Christian people commented on that video that we want that back, by the way, as if it is somehow part of Christendom. Remember the concept of Christendom? And that the Christian world was kind of like a state, just like you have the so-called Islamic state, you had the Christian state, Christendom, and the European Crusaders were looking to expand Christendom. Pat Riot is saying evening all, and Brian Cannot Tell is of course greeting me with peace as ever. Shalom to you, Brian. Peace be unto you. But as much as that expression originates from the Middle East, is there any peace ever? Jerusalem, shalom. The salam in Jerusalem means peace, but we can't even find peace outside a church. But going back to Crac du Chevalier, this medieval castle where the Crusaders were, someone in the comments was saying, oh, we want that back, by the way, as if it belongs to the Christians, but of course it belongs to the Syrians, whether they're Christian or Muslim. But does France have an eye on the Middle East? Did the colonizers ever go away? I believe the French colonies in Africa still pay millions every year to their former colonial masters. And it's interesting that a French Prime Minister, president rather, can demand an Israeli to remove themselves, but a Palestinian cannot. And it seems that many countries can march around the world and declare that such and such a place is French soil, American soil, you're now on Canadian soil or whatever. It seems like everyone can do that anywhere they like, apart from Palestinians in Palestine. Some people are reluctant to even admit that there is such a place. And DJ Russell is saying salam means hello in Persian. Salam, khubi, chatori, kheli mamnoon. I speak a little bit of Persian or Farsi, or Parsi as it was once known. And of course, salam is a word that came into the Persian vernacular from Arabic and Hebrew and Aramaic all go back to the same roots. And DJ Russell is agreeing, yeah, Farsi. Now, just to go off an Iranian tangent for a moment, I haven't heard from Mac yet, but he often contributes to the show. The language in Iran is known as Farsi with an F or a F sound, but I understand thousands of years ago it would have been Parsi, and the Parsis that fled Persia to India retain the name and the hard P, and this F that you find in the Iranian language now is actually arrived from Arabic. And of course, Arabs have a hard time pronouncing the letter P, so anything in the Persian language that did begin with a P became an F sound. So Pars, the region in the south of Iran, became Fars, Balad al-Fars, because Arabs didn't have the letter P. And DJ Russell is mentioning it's a beautiful language, but very difficult. Well, it should be, Persian should be easier for Europeans to learn than, for example, Hebrew or Arabic, because it is an Indo-European language. And we've mentioned before that Iran took the name from the Aryans, and we know the Nazis thought that the Aryans were a blue-eyed European race, but they might have been something else. But we got a caller on line one. We're about to find out who this is.
It's your Persian encyclopedia.
Hey, Baba. Welcome. It's funny, we got onto Iran even without you. It just comes up, and there you are. How you doing?
And I have to pop up and say hello.
You're always welcome.
Not bad.
You're always welcome.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about everything that you've said. I mean, to be quite honest, we have camion, ascensor, all of these are French words which are the same meaning in Iranian. Camion is like a truck, camion, they say. Ascensor is like a lift. So, like we say merci, they say merci.
Now, saying merci to say thank you, is that something that arrived from France recently, or is it because it's an Indo-European language?
Charles he could speak French, so he was trying to modernize. To be honest with you, the French. I mean, they've even rubbed off in the English, like déjà vu or entrepreneur.
Well, George Bush said it. The French don't have a word for entrepreneur.
That is their word. Rapport, repartee, all of these are French words. Just building rapport with you, for example. That's a French word.
What did the Persians say for thank you before the French influence?
Well, there is other ways of saying it. We say tashakur.
So tashakur,
Or tashakara.
Tashakara. But this...
Mutashakara means I'm very thankful and grateful.
But that sounds to me like an Arabic influence, as in shukran. And in Urdu they have shukriya. This has obviously come from
very true.
Arabic
very
influence.
True.
Is there a pure Persian way of saying thank you?
Yeah, that is the. I mean, but this is the thing. When the Republic of when it became Islamic of Iran, they changed. They didn't. The guy Khomeini didn't like the lingo, and he wanted to change it back to Mutashek because it's more closer to the Arabic lingo, isn't it? So
interesting. But I'm talking 1,500 years ago. What was? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about is the famous Shahnameh, which is what like you know how they say they look at Shakespeare's sonnets and Shakespeare's writing, and that's like the purest English that you can get, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We Iranians have something similar called Shahnameh, which is the. I'm sure you've heard Shah means king, Nameh means letter.
What is it called again?
Shahnameh.
Shahnameh. The king of letters, basically.
Letters, yeah, the king of letters.
I believe the Sikhs have something called Gurmukhi, which might be similar, which is an ancient form of their written language.
Yeah. Now, if you ask any Iranian about Rustam, they will tell you about how this is our old
Naqshi Rustam.
Yeah, Rustam and Sorab, which is his son. He's like a Hercules type of character, which apart from his son, and then years later, because I mean, apparently he would walk and he's such a warrior and this, that, the other, and then eventually he has it out with his son at the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then as he's murdering his son goes, "Oh, you don't know who I am. If my father finds out, he'll kill you." And he goes, "Who is your father?" And then he obviously realizes it was his son.
Star Wars moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's more story to it.
And he says, "Know that I am your father." Is that where Star Wars got it from?
Well, I don't know, Rostam. I'm telling you, this is an old school. This is what I'm saying. It's a very if you
spooky.
Google it, it's a, and this is the funny part. The Arabs before the Prophet came, they had no kind of entertainment. So what they would do is actually go send linguists to Iran, learn all of this because it's poetry. It's Persian at its purest form.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would obviously go back to the Babylonian kings and recite it back to them in obviously, but it was a story. It's a poem story, and then they would obviously convert it into their Arabic and obviously explain what the story is about. But it's really well known in the region, and it's called Shahnameh, and it's by Ferdowsi, I think.
Shahnameh, and does that relate to our word name, as in someone's name?
No, Shahnameh is.
Nameh means letter.
Letter, yeah.
Well, you're right. I mean, you write your name with letters. It might be related.
So even the Indian language, I mean, it initially comes from words derived from that actual. That's why. This is why usually the victors write history, don't they?
Yes, that's right.
But in our case, we, as well as being historical, we haven't had the opportunity of usually. I mean, if for example the Nazi would have won, we would probably be speaking in German right now. So,
yeah, that's what they're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
And the Arabs won in Persia. That's why it became Farsi and not Parsi.
We were never able to get rid of that historical document, Shahnameh, which is the most purest form of. That's what I'm saying. We've right now this 52 sites. They're all historical sites. Iran. Yeah. If you were to watch that documentary In Search of Paradise, David Rahal, which is an archaeologist with PhD from Oxford University, goes to Iran looking for where Ain and Cable was murdered, where he was, and you can see the mountains red because God said what was the punishment that he can't live there. He banished him, the brother, from so he was not even using the Quran. He was using the Bible biblically, trying to from satellite from the Euphrates, because obviously it talks about the Pison and the Gion. You know the two extra rivers or not?
Oh yeah.
Are you aware of the Pion and the Gion?
I can get as far as the Euphrates, that's Iraq, right? And then you're next door. Tigris and Euphrates is Iraq, the land between the two rivers.
Because in the Bible, there's two other rivers that come from, because there's the three, apparently, and he was able, through satellite imaging, to find where these two other rivers were. So, and it is kind of based up north of Iran. Which is interesting, but again, this is something, if you look, it's called, on YouTube, In Search of Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
And it's with David Arnold. So it's really interesting anyway. But going off topic, going back to the linguistics, so the purest form of Iranian you'd probably find in the Shahnameh.
Mm-hmm. And what about Sanskrit? Is Sanskrit related to Persian? It's also an Indo-European language, right?
You're talking about cuneiform, right, text?
Well, Sanskrit is the ancient form of Hindi.
Sumerians. Sumerian or the Phoenician.
There we go, Phoenicians.
Is that what you're talking about?
No, look, Sanskrit, language of ancient India with a 3,500-year history, primary liturgical language of Hinduism. I'm just trying to find out what the meaning of it is, but this is another old Indo-European language, and it must be related to Hindi. But for a long time, the language or the lingua franca of India was Persia, right? Was Persian under the Mughal, were the Mughals?
Yeah, the
Persian speaking.
The Genghis Khan came. Yeah, so I mean, even there was the Ottoman Empire, as you even clearly stated, I think it was yesterday, where you said Omar Khayyam himself must have been in the Umayyad Caliphate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah. I went there.
And there was the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
After that took over. So yeah. But I mean, it's interesting. But this is another thing. Edgar Casey.
Yeah, I will eventually get around to watching him. Edgar Casey.
They call him a prophet, and as well as a prophet, he was the one that was able to. If it wasn't for him, we would have never found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I don't know if you know anything about.
Yeah, it was a discovery in Egypt in the early 20th century, was it, or late 19th, that confirmed a lot of what the Bible.
Late 19th, yeah, because Edgar Casey was I think in the 2030s, 1920s and 30s, kind of like he's living around that region. So his prediction, he was like the 19th century Nostradamus kind of thing.
Didn't some terrible things happen to the people that made that discovery, or am I imagining it?
No, that was a tomb they found. What it was one of the mummies' tombs they found, but what they didn't realize was they thought the tombs were cursed, but what they didn't seem to realize is the chemicals to preserve the coloring and the actual tomb, they were toxic.
So it wasn't just a curse like Scooby-Doo.
No. They would go into the actual tomb, and obviously, I mean, they believe it or not, again, research. The mummies used to do cocaine. Right now, they've taken mummies out of their tomb, and they've obviously done DNA, and they've found traces of cocaine on them, which is weird. So, like that's another secret that as well as you do know they had electricity, like they generated not high voltages, but enough.
I have heard they had batteries in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
Double A's.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they knew about the sulfuric acid and two eyes. They had an idea on how to, with acid to make current and to light up low voltages, but again, this is what I'm saying. They had apparently, if it wasn't for, even they say Atlantis, they can't find this Atlantis thing, but there's obviously old esoteric or hermetic knowledge that we like going back to yesterday's conversation. We do have this innate sensibility that we're not, and the reason why we're not able to tune or use that ability is because we're too focused on this 4D world. So as soon as we wake up, we look at our phones, we're attached to it. Do you see what I'm saying? This is why Buddha or whichever religion tries to get you to do like your meditative state sort of situation. So
to escape that five sense reality.
Yeah, you get rid of that five sense reality, and you gain that ability that really serves you correctly. But this is where TV and everything's a distraction, and it won't allow you that moment of peace. Or does that make sense?
Yeah. DJ Russell is saying it's the Baghdad battery. They had high technology that we don't understand. So maybe in Iraq they had similar thing. Babylon was a very advanced civilization in that time, right? I mean, this is the cradle of civilization, this region. I think it's why it's going to be central.
Babel is what the LHC, the CERN, the long the collider, the Hadron Collider.
Yeah.
They're trying to say that basically it was because in the Bible it says they were trying to build the tower to hit the skies to obviously reach God.
To be high and to reach God, and God punished them.
Yeah,
and that's why we speak in many tongues now.
Exactly. So yeah, that is what eventually I'm sure the history is going to, like you were saying, is going to repeat itself. Well,
do you take that story to be true, or does it have an allegorical, deeper meaning?
Well, in some ways, I mean, this is the thing. Well, the victor's always been, told from one perspective, but I mean, they are the chosen people at the same time. In one.
Mac, call me back in a bit. I'm going to see who this is, but you're welcome back in 10, all right? And we go to another line. Oh, I've lost it. Caller, whoever that was, call again, and we'll try and get you back on. I've got someone else, just because we want to mix it up, but we'll go back to what Mac was saying. Mac, give him a minute. If he doesn't jump back on, feel free to call back in. Mac talking about the Tower of Babel, which is this fabled tower that they tried to build up to be as high as God, which is a very sort of arrogant thing to attempt to do. And interestingly, there's a hadith that talks about the barefooted Bedouins competing in high towers. Maybe that on a similar vein. Who's this? Welcome. Who's this?
The Turk. This is the Turk.
The Turk is back. Merhaba. You're welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. It's a late one tonight. I'm glad you're up late. You must be a fellow insomniac.
Yes, I get a notification every time you do a live stream.
Good man, I'm glad you got it. Yeah, that's a reminder to all our subscribers. Make sure you got the bell turned on.
Yes, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What's the topics?
Well, look, we were talking about language. We always go back to Persian. We've got this French church in Jerusalem, and the president told the Israeli police to get outside. This is a region that has been fought over. The Turkish people ruled Jerusalem 100 years ago. For a brief time after that, the British ruled it, but there's still a part of Jerusalem that is apparently French territory. I'm just wondering why that region is so fought over. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, it's because it's like has some religious context that it's like the Holy Land, but it's just a bunch of hoopla. Any land is holy, you know?
Do you think any land can be holy?
Yes, except Native American burial lands.
Well, it's holy to them, isn't it? But that's where you get ghosts, apparently.
Yeah, I believe in that because it's like a whole bunch of negative energy. But you can only visit it. You can't live on it. You'll go crazy.
Have you ever encountered any sort of spooky phenomenon in such a place?
No, nothing.
One night I'm going to do a night devoted to ghosts and whatnot, because we've been very sort of serious recently. We do need to open our mind.
I have visited the Native American reservation in Arizona, and it's very peaceful over there. I bought a shirt from them with a wolf on it.
Wow.
I have their spirit. It's very nice. I felt very at home with them. They're nice people.
Wow. And
anyways, before we carry on,
no problem.
Save that thought.
Yeah.
If the coronavirus ever comes to the UK, I'm going back to Turkey and I'm coming back after everybody dies.
Coronavirus patient is sealed in a plastic tube to avoid being contaminating others while being transported by Chinese medics in hazmat suits. I've got the picture on the screen there. This reminded me very much of E.T. You know, at the end when they're all padded up and trying to what's the word? Quarantine the alien. Do you think it's going to end up like that? Are we going to see mass panic?
I hope not. Hopefully it's not that bad. They say it's just 10% mortality rate, but it could get worse than that. Like, these viruses mutate very quickly.
In the last few years, I can remember bird flu, SARS, swine flu, Ebola. Every few years.
Ebola is only in Africa.
Yeah, luckily, because we put it on lockdown, didn't we?
Yeah.
And the American government were ready to send soldiers out there to defeat Ebola. I don't know how that was going to work. And the Cubans were sending doctors. What does that tell you, Turk?
Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty serious.
Yeah.
But how crazy is it that Ebola makes you bleed from every hole? How crazy is that?
It's hard to imagine. Yeah, doesn't bear thinking about.
Yeah. Well, what are the other topics here?
So look, I've scrolled through a few here. Get your take on this one, because this relates to America. Okay, I've got two. Funny enough, like buses, you wait all day and then two come along at once. Two stories appeared on my phone relating to dreads or dreadlocks. So you've got Texas school district bars black student from graduating with dreadlocks.
Yes, I saw that one. It's a bit fucked up that they did that.
How can you enforce a rule about how someone chooses to wear their hair? Some people like to cover their hair. Some people like to grow their hair. Some people like to shave it off. Why would a school not want somebody, black or otherwise, to graduate with dreadlocks?
Yes, I agree. It's very messed up and inappropriate for a school to do that. But if he doesn't want to walk, he has a simple option of cutting it. But I do understand that he wants the light to shed on it. It is a bit messed up the school had to do that.
If the guy must have studied for 3 years and he must have been growing dreadlocks for longer than that. Someone could have told him earlier and he could have chosen a different school. Fair enough if you lay the rules out and say, by the way, if you join us, you're going to have to shave your head. But by letting someone study all that time and then they're ready to graduate and then you stipulate they need to change their hair, seems a bit unfair to me.
I agree as well. It is a bit unfair. But the whole ceremony of graduation never really jived with me. I was never a big fan of it.
Well, I guess
it's
just another day. But what about this? Mother accused of neglect for letting daughter 3 have dreadlocks. She's been accused of neglect, abuse, and worst of all, cultural appropriation.
Is this a white lady?
This is a 3-year-old daughter of a white lady, it seems. She looks white to me. And she appears to have dreadlocks also, and her child has dreadlocks, and they're accusing her of neglect, abuse, and worst of all, cultural appropriation.
Do you know which state?
Do you know, I don't even know which country this is.
Oh, okay. But, that's all right. But I would say if white people decide to get dreadlocks, it's a bit dirty.
Why if white people do it?
Because when white people do it, you have to alter your hair for it to be very dry and not natural to its current state. So you have to alter it, as opposed to black people's hair is naturally nappy. So it's a lot easier for them to do it.
Interesting.
White people, you gotta really dry it out somehow, like artificially. It's not natural for whites.
Do you think it is it's cultural appropriation when white people wear their hair as such?
Not necessarily, because there was plenty of other cultures that did dreadlocks that weren't black. So.
Can you name any?
Vikings had dreadlocks.
Oh wow! So this mother, you think she's ill-advised to let the child, but it's not cultural appropriation.
Definitely. No, it's not cultural appropriation. Neglect, definitely.
So locks are not exclusive to the black man. They're just popularised, and as you said, the Viking. But maybe the Vikings were black. How do we know?
Well, the Vikings in the future are definitely going to be black now, because the Somalians and the refugees are going to outpopulate the Swedes.
Yeah.
So definitely they're going to be black in the future.
Well, we're all on our way to being mixed, and I'm sure you're fully looking forward to it, Turk.
Yes, I love diversity is our strength.
Well said. Turk, you bring a bit of diversity to this show. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There was another topic.
Oh yeah, go on. Then what have you got for us?
What's it called? They held like a World War II Holocaust thing.
Yes.
Not too long ago, and apparently Poland wasn't invited.
Oh, why not?
Because they just weren't. It was like because Russia has some beef with Poland now, because we weren't cool. We were never cool because Russia always dominated Poland.
Yeah, there is a little bit of history between the two, right?
So they didn't, and Jerusalem also didn't invite the Polish president.
Okay.
So I have to say, goddamn, whoever attended that meeting, goddamn all those people, they should get bombed by a U.S. drone strike.
And as ever, these are the views of the Turk, and not the views of Lessons for Life. But okay, I mean, it seems to be that Poland is getting the cold shoulder there. Bit of isolationism.
Yes.
Not good.
Yes, and also hopefully the coronavirus. It's so funny that the coronavirus is named after a beer. How funny is that? When I was reading it, I was like,
there was a Mexican beer, Corona, or Spanish or something.
It's Mexican, because I'm a little dyslexic.
Okay.
I'm a little dyslexic, and I was like, does it really say Corona, like the beer? And I was like, read this. I was like, yeah, it's Corona. What the fuck?
Well, there it is. They got to name it after something.
Yeah. All right, brother.
My brother, thank you very much for calling in. We always appreciate it. And regards to your magician friend, the wheels are in motion for that link up. We'll be collaborating soon.
Definitely.
Superb.
Definitely, 100%. Yes.
All right. Well, I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Turk. Thank you. Superb. Always great to hear from the Turk with his opinionated opinions on Lessons for Life, and interesting what he was saying about locks being not just exclusive to black cultures. The Vikings had it, and going back to the Bible and the Tower of Babel and all of that lot, we are told, or I was told by Hebrew Israelites, that Samson's strength in his uncut hair, that of course Delilah persuaded him to chop off, and then he lost his strength. That would be a suggestion that locks are not just permitted, but encouraged, required from biblical teaching. And let's have a look at the comments. And Pat Riot is saying, look at Jane Bergmeister Baxter Pharmaceuticals exposure about the H5N1 virus. This was part of my waking 10 years ago. Yeah. There's so much to learn. I think you've got to almost be a medical doctor to understand the difference between a virus and other outbreaks, and you can't use antibiotics don't work for a virus. I'm not sure why that is, but they work. It works differently. Let's have a look at another story, and the lines are free, by the way, if anyone wants to get involved. If Mac wants to get back in, he's free to. The number to call is in the description, and it is 07880 526 445. But in the meantime, let's have a look at The Guardian. 2 years after he was executed, damning evidence emerges that could prove Ledouli's innocence. Yeah, innocent man executed. I don't agree with the death penalty, even if he's not an innocent man. We should be better than murderers. And this is just one of the reasons we shouldn't have the death penalty, but that's not the only reason. And even if we had a guaranteed 100% DNA proven case of a murderer committing a murder, as they tend to do, I would still not agree with the death penalty. The death penalty is barbaric, and we should be better than murderers. Anyone wants to wade in on that one, you're welcome, but that's pretty much all I've got to say on it. 07880 526 445. Give me a call. Otherwise, we are back to talking about France's Macron berating the Israeli police. Wow. Is it a case of European supremacy and the Europeans still calling the shots in that part of the world? Is it the tail wagging the dog? Who calls the shots in the Middle East? Is Israel the outpost of European colonialism, or have the tables turned? Are these wars in the Middle East, as some would have us believe, wars for Israel? Or is Israel part of the ongoing project? We're back on the calls, and I'm hoping this is Matt calling me back. Is it Return of the Mac?
Yeah.
You're back in. Welcome back.
It is.
Superb.
Obviously, I'm intrigued about. I mean, at the same time, with this France, with the Macron thing that's happening, you do know that Mike Pence, I think, was linking up with the Prime Minister of Israel as well.
What was Mike Pence saying?
None. There was just a little link up in it, just to show that their support for Israel, which is what it comes really down to. But if we're going to look at facts, then Europeans have more of an influence in that region based on the Bafla text.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what that's what's been played out? I mean, that's why UK probably are there, because of this withheld contract, like this contract that's holding them in place. But it's as you were saying, who has the most say in that region? Well, at the moment, it seems to be Israel, isn't it? Which I've said, this is my personal opinion, and again, this is why I believe in the Israeli state, and because even religious-wise, historical-wise, the Rebbe has changed. That's for a reason.
Yeah, I know. So, it seems to be the only reason you've got.
Well, that's the thing. They're not following the Sunnah. They're not really, because the Rasulullah, as I say, the Prophet, has directed them in a different way. So why are you not following? I mean, yeah, the night of Miraj or Safa Miraj, where he goes and it ascends to the heavens. Yeah, I mean, it's a holy spot before, the Kaaba being the direction of our prayers. We also used to pray towards Jerusalem, so that we can't deny that it's not Holy Land. But at the same time, if it was promised to the chosen people eventually, and when the Messiah will come, and they're waiting for their Messiah. That's what it comes down to. So at the end of the day, we know that Jesus is going to come back, and so if they didn't accept him the first time, they will definitely accept him the second time. So that's what it's supposed to be. So then,
who, as we're on the topic, who will accept the Antichrist to be the Christ? Who will fall for it?
It's all a funny game, but in my opinion, I think this is where the Jesus role. I mean, the Muslims have the Mahdi. They're gonna, whatever the Mahdi gives his allegiance to, the Muslims will follow accordingly. Now, if Jesus appears, that would be the main bond of the three religions. Does that make sense?
So for people that might not know exactly what we're talking about, the main three religions, or in that region, are all waiting for these figures that will appear at the end of times. You've got the Mahdi, who the Muslims are looking forward to as some kind of guide who will come just before Jesus returns. Christians and Muslims alike are waiting for the return of Christ. And Jews are still waiting for a Messiah of some sorts because they rejected Jesus, and they're still waiting for a Messiah, right?
Yeah. So, I mean...
So they're all waiting for something, or someone.
This move that Macron did, I mean, it's a French maneuver. I mean, even as an expression, like we were talking about linguistics, how entrepreneur and but then again, when you want to swear, you say "pardon my French." Like, there's something to it. So,
DJ Russell is asking, Antichrist comes before Christ, right? Chronologically, according to the Bible and the Muslim tradition, the Antichrist will appear before Jesus, and then later Jesus will arrive and kill him, right?
He's going to make false peace for a good couple of years, and he's going to travel the 86 nations, important nations, whatever, and have... So basically...
And he'll rule the world from Jerusalem. He's got one eye, apparently. There are many different traditions about what he may or may not be.
Yeah.
But he's the deceiver.
Essentially, he will have... I mean, the thing is, I personally say, was it David Blaine or... No, not David. What's the guy that was walking on Thames?
David Blaine, magician.
Was it David Blaine or no? It was the English one.
Darren Brown?
No, I forgot his name. But,
the guy from up north, yeah. I know the one you mean.
And he's got a disease, and he's not really well. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, and he even did the fish thing from a bucket. Like, he was just piles of fish was coming out from a bucket. Like, he was trying to do the same. So that, I mean, for me, is what the Antichrist is eventually going to reach to. He's going to come convince people that he is capable of bringing your ancestors.
He's going to bring people back from the dead, and you will see your father, and your father will say, "Do you recognize me?" But it's a trick, right?
Yeah.
He will bring these illusions. But Jesus raised the dead, so a good guy does it and a bad guy does it. How do we know?
Jesus does arrive. From the sight of Jesus, he will melt. Apparently.
Yeah, he will melt like salt in water.
So, yeah. And he will be obviously bricking his pants at the same time when he hears Jesus coming. Then once Jesus eradicates him, then he's got to deal with Gog and Magog.
Yeah.
that is the next
spread corruption on the earth.
Yeah, this is just, as I said, this is the biblical version. I haven't even gone to the Islamic version, so I'm just staying on biblical terms.
Well, don't they tie together, the biblical and the Quranic? Is there much conflict between them?
In some ways, yeah. I mean, as I said, Jesus is to fuse the three religions together, because essentially we're all believing in one God, and we all believe that Jesus should. I mean, they haven't accepted him the first time; they will the second time, hopefully, as a righteous sent messenger from God, or actual message from God. Well, in some ways, I wouldn't say the Holy Spirit, but I'd say obviously, you see, because we here say from after the Prophet, the 12 Imams are infallible. Okay. No, I kind of correct that. I said, no, it's not, because they call them the 14 infallibles. I say, no, it's the 16 infallible. Because from when Jesus was born, what Christians don't know, what Muslims believe, is that Jesus was lecturing at the age of 3 hours of being born.
3 hours?
3 hours. That is one of his miracles. So this is what I was touching on, how walking on water or piles of fish from a bucket. These are miracles. It's not even a miracle. Even turning water to wine, that's chemistry. If you can understand the chemical bonds, and you can achieve that. Mm-hmm. But what we should really call a miracle is being able to talk at the age of 3 hours of being born.
How do you know it's 3 hours? I know they say in the Quran he spoke from the cradle.
They say that his mum, to prove that she was untouched. Again, this is even the prophet's daughter had to have intercourse in order to have a baby, but she had a baby untouched. Now, what more pure, infallible than that can you get?
Well, you see, I don't think that would make you pure or impure. But I mean, who had the stopwatch?
If you've not been touched by a man and you've managed to be impregnated, that's immaculate conception, which means you've not done the actual sex or what.
By the way, immaculate conception refers to Mary being born without sin, not the virgin birth. The virgin birth and immaculate conception are two different things that are often conflated, but they mean different things.
Yeah, I made that mistake myself, but I just realised what you...
That's all right.
But thank you for correcting me. Please do, if I do make mistakes,
that's all good.
I'd like to be corrected.
Well, yeah, we all learn together. But I get the point you're making. You're alluding to the fact that Mary was a virgin, apparently. I don't know why that's important to Christians and Muslims, but it is.
No, okay. This is why we know as a miracle he was talking at the age of 3 hours, because God forced upon Mary, she had to do a fast for a good, I don't know, a few days.
Yeah.
And the fast involved her not talking. So she was banned from talking. And she obviously asked God, how am I going to explain myself if I'm not meant to talk? And then God said, don't worry. And then obviously the miracle. So as she arrived with a newborn baby a day later, the baby's talking. Everyone's just astonished to their amazement to see, okay, well, this baby seems to be a miracle because it's just born yesterday and it's talking.
Yeah.
This unseen. So this is one of the other emphasized miracles, as well as bringing dead person back to life, giving sight to the blind and hearing to the deaf.
All the good things that the Dajjal is going to do as well, right? Because he has to impersonate the Christ. Maybe that's why he does it.
Exactly my point. So the Dajjal or the Antichrist has got to be able to do all of these. So right now, I'm watching David Blaine get the frog out of his stomach. He can do mad stuff like that. I'll find out his Dynamo.
Yeah, that's the British guy. Yeah,
that's the guy that was walking on Thames. Dynamo is the guy that is basically doing all of these. And if you look at, he does the bucket trick. He literally has got an empty bucket, and then he goes. I think he's in Africa as well. He starts emptying it out, and the bucket loads. And I'm talking, by the time he finishes, it's like 30 bucketfuls of fish he just brought out from one bucket.
Yeah.
So these are miracles. So for me, I can see the signs of Antichrist easily appearing, because if these magicians are capable to achieve, I think this is where I think Dynamo and people like that is staged. I don't know if it's really true. I mean,
of course it is. Of course it's staged.
I think it was a green room, or people, or I don't know, did people actually see him? They say some people said he had a glass on Thames and he's walking on a glass. And I don't know, but as a magician, you know that there are many
ways. Look, I think the message in religion is always deeper than we think it is. I once asked a priest if the Garden of Eden story was literally true, and he said, no, it's much truer than that. Dajjal is described as the deceiver, and we know that there are evil beings, entities, people, whatever, who are trying to deceive us. We know that truthfulness is the good way, and being a deceiver, being deceptive, is the bad way. I think it's deeper than just a magician. I think these people are entertainers. I wouldn't start looking at David Blaine as being something satanic. The satanic people are the people deceiving us into war and into killing millions of people.
You read my mind.
Well, there you go. Shazam.
Been satanic rituals still occurring this day and age?
Do I believe in satanic rituals occurring? Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Sacrificial virgin child. It's funny how the Mayans used to throw the virgin girls or whatever down the pit.
Or they sacrifice it to a dragon.
Or open heart. Or I don't know, all sort of madnesses they used to do, like, which I wasn't there, but I've read about. So, do you think these sort of rituals still, in some places under some low-key ground, they still practice it?
Yes, definitely, and I think a lot of the paedophile activity that goes on in the upper echelons of the state is because these people believe that they are gaining energy, some kind of energy from young children by putting them through horrific torture. I would imagine that does go on. In the comments, we've got a question: would the Dajjal be able to rise the sun from the east and make it set in the west? I think there's a...
Will bring dead people back to life. Of course he would be able to do that.
But isn't there a prophecy about the sun will rise in the...
From the west.
East, from the west, rather, the opposite to usual.
Right now it's from the east to the west, but when Judgment Day will come, it will be the opposite. It will be west. But that is the easiest thing he'll probably be able to do. Like, because he will have. I mean, we say it's God's world, but reality is God's world is after this world. This is the devil's world, really. Really and truly, I think the amount of influence the devil has in this world, it is his world. God's given him that permission to.
It's interesting. The words secular and worldly come from the same root. On the dollar bill, it says Nuevo Ordo Seclorum, a new world order. Seclorum means world. So secular means worldly, and if you are godly, you believe in something greater than this world, something else, right?
Then I might as well tell you, you're going to see a lot of 32 degrees and a lot of these. Number 9 is a hot number for the Masonic people, and they put a compass in your face as a symbol, and they
number 9, yeah.
It's all to do with degrees. That's why it's 32 degrees.
Well, isn't 30, I thought it was 33 degrees, and 3 times 3 is 9.
Yeah, but then again, that's the highest degree. But it doesn't actually equate to that. Why I'm saying 9 is because 360 degrees is a circle. You understand?
Yeah.
And that's what they base. That's why there's a compass.
That's
on their logo. So if you look at pictures of Newton, you'll see the compass in the corner. They are part of the Masonic. But if the normal eye isn't looking for it or doesn't have the hidden knowledge, will not see the same Masonic compasses and ruler in the corner of the picture of like Newton of this and that, and you're thinking, wow, this is so now it's them showing that from that time they were aware of this 360 degrees, and from the 360 degrees, if you basically cut it down 180, then cut it down 180 is 90. That's